Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Trevor Yoakum, and this is my wife, Kimberly. If you just want to stand, honey. So, Kimberly says I'm the talker in the family, so she's asked if I would be the one to do the presentation, but she's the one, don't be fooled, she's the one who organizes and keeps me going in the family. So just remember that. If you have your Bible, turn with me to the book of 2 Timothy chapter 2, just a passage I want to read that will be the capstone of everything that we will be discussing tonight. 2 Timothy chapter 2, I'll be reading the first two verses. If we want to cue that PowerPoint presentation just at the beginning there, very good, thank you. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 and 2 read, "You then, my child, be strengthened by the grace that is in Christ Jesus, and what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." We are part of the Baptist mission of Togo, and you can see everybody in that picture up above, and it's what I'm going to be giving is a snapshot of our ministry. I teach at the Pastoral Seminary campus, which is located in Lomé, Togo. I'll tell you more where that is, where that's located in Africa as I go on with my presentation. But it's part of the Great Bend Cluster, which is a particular region, most of which are French-speaking African countries in West Africa. And again, it's part of sub-Saharan Africa. If you see everybody in that picture, the man standing next to me is Marcelin. He is our country coordinator. He's what keeps me going because I visit more than just the country of Togo. We do other places as well as part of our responsibilities with theological education. Next to Marcelin is Samuel Avise. He is the evangelist for the Toko Baptist Convention, and he will accompany us in many of our evangelistic outreaches. And so we're grateful for all the help that Samuel gives. Next to Samuel is Florence. You might not be able to make her out very well from that picture. It's a little blurry, but Florence is essential to everything that we do because Florence is our housekeeper. Without her washing the dishes and keeping everything, staying on top of the laundry, Kimberly could not do everything that she does. And Kimberly is responsible for a lot of the administrative work that goes on with all of our ministry, keeping passports up to date, making sure I've got visas so that I can travel, and doing a host of other things. She's also keeping track of a lot of our humanitarian ministries, mercy ministries, but she couldn't do that if she had to do all the housework. And so Florence is what helps keep us stay on top of all of that. And then you see at the far end, I'll introduce our family in just a minute, but the person at the far end is a good dear friend of mine who works in our ministry. His name is Pastor Denny Otto. Denny was among the first group of students that I taught whenever I began teaching at the Pastoral Seminary back in 2009. He was also the student, every graduate of Pastoral who earns a licence, which in the French educational system, that's the equivalent of a Bachelor of Arts degree here in the United States. And everyone who earns a licence must write a senior paper. Well, I was Denny's advisor for his senior paper. So that's why I have a special place in my heart for him and the ministry that he does. He helps us with a lot of our ministry projects. And collectively, we call ourselves the Baptist Mission of Togo. You notice there's only one family there. Those are our 4 children. They're in your Awanas program tonight as I'm speaking. Our oldest, the fellow in the red t-shirt there is Tristan. He's 17. And the daughter, our oldest daughter standing next to Tristan is Marianne. She's 15. And then in front of them, you see the boy in the black shirt. That is Aiden. He is 13. And Christiana is the girl in front of Kimberly, and she is 11 years old. So we're proud of all of our kids, and it's been pretty exciting to see them grow in Togo while we've been doing ministry. As we advance on the slide, that's okay. Our location, of course, is Lomé, Togo. That is a city that's on the coast. So if we just advance one more section, you may be asking yourself, where in the world is Togo? I'm glad that you asked that question. You can see the arrow pointing to Togo there. We're in West Africa, and you see it's facing the coast. Togo is a very small country. Altogether, it's about the size of Vermont and New Hampshire combined. In fact, the beach road that connects Togo with Ghana on one side and the country of Benin on the other side is about 38 miles running along the coast. If you go from the coast all the way to the north of the country, touching on the border with Burkina Faso, it's roughly 480 miles. And it's one of the smallest countries in Africa, although not the smallest. Its population is about 7 million people. And we live in the city of Lomé, which is a city, depending on where you draw the lines or the borders of the city, we're running anywhere from about 1 million to 1.5 million people. So as we advance again. So there's a lot of things that we do with our ministry in Togo. Now, my primary job, full-time, is working in theological education. But here's something that you need to understand. You saw that there was, for the Baptist Mission of Togo, only one missionary family there outside of the Togolese that are working alongside us. We are the only IMB missionary family living in Togo. And it wasn't always that way. When we first arrived, there were 2 other families living there with us, and the husbands were involved with the seminary just like I was, and the wives did their own respective ministries. And within 2 years, the other 2 families left. And we are the only family remaining. You may wonder, why is it that it happens that way? One of the realities that you need to understand about West Africa is we have the highest attrition rate of missionaries in all the rest of the world. More missionaries cycle through West Africa than anywhere else. And the simple reason is it's tough to live in West Africa. We live in a city compared to other families that I see that live miles, hours away from any kind of civilization. We have it pretty easy, actually. In fact, I consider ourselves blessed when I think of some of the hardships that other people face and where they have to live. But living where we do in Lomé is pretty difficult. And so while we do teach theological education or work in theological education, and I teach at the seminary, please don't think that that's all that we do. And so what I'm trying to give you is an overview of everything that we do, and it follows the whole missionary process. You know, there is a process that a whole mission will undergo, and we decided that we were going to keep the mission going, even if we were just one family. And we follow that process, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. And some people from outside Togo that work within our organization look and see everything that we have going, and people even in the United States look at all the different activities that we have going on, and they say, we don't know how you do it. And the normal reaction that I give whenever people say to me, I don't know how you do it, is, that's okay because we don't. And they wonder, okay, what does that mean if you say you're doing all these things but then it's not you doing it? The simple fact is, without volunteers and ministry partners, we could not be doing all of this. Most of the work that I am doing, we partner completely with the Togo Baptist Convention. And so we partner with churches, we partner with local ministers, local pastors, and many times we'll say, we have this job here, we have this job here, and we look for a guy that would be willing to help us and work with that. And so they're the ones who are doing a lot of the groundwork, and we act as facilitators to make sure that it happens. So when you see everything that's going on, just realize, my full-time job, I'm sitting at the seminary, I will go out, but much of the legwork that is happening is through our partners with the Togo Baptist Convention, as well as with volunteer teams that come from the United States and Baptist churches such as this one. But one step in that whole missionary process is people group research. You see, in Togo, as small as it is, there are about 10 different people groups. That's a tribal group that have their own language. There are about 35 different languages in Togo, just to give you an idea. And there are about 10 of these groups. We don't have any church listed among them, or the number of Christians is very small, less than 2% of the population. But one of the things that we had to do, because we were the only people there, we didn't have any records about these people groups. We didn't even know if they were still there. And so one of the things that we do is people group research. You'll see me in that photo, you'll see some other people in the photo, and the other American that you see in that photo along with me is a representative of Heart of Life Baptist Church in Kansas City. And he came as a volunteer team. While the rest of the team was going somewhere else, he went with us. We did not know if this particular people group was even in the country. The fellow standing close to me was one of our guides. And he approached me as we traveled north, up country in Togo, and stopped in Sokode, which is the second largest city in Togo. And just as we got settled into our hotel rooms, this fellow approached me and said, everywhere that I'm asking about this particular people group, everyone's telling me they're not here in this country. In fact, they're over across the border in the country of Benin. And my response to him was, part of research is knowing what's not there, as well as finding what is there. So if we find that there are none of this particular people group there, that's something we're going to scratch off the list, and we'll send a report to the mission about it. Well, the very next morning, we got into our mission van, and we drove into the bush. And many times I wondered if we were going to come back because of the difficulty in traveling some of these paths. It was not a road. It was a path. And many times it seemed unnavigable, but we made it. And 5 kilometers away from the Benin border, we found the first village. And then we found out there were 2 more villages not very far away from the Benin border. And come to find out, the vast majority of the population was on the Benin side, but there were 3 villages of this particular people group in Togo. And so that enabled us to be able to strategize, coordinate, and decide what are we going to do to impact these 3 villages with the gospel in Togo. You see, people group research is a very important thing because otherwise, if you just step in with a bunch of gospel tracts and you start evangelizing people, you could end any kind of missionary activity going there for a very long time. And so it's important to know where it is that you're working. And we did more than just that research with that group. If it wasn't myself, it was other people, including 2-year volunteers who would go and do the research, working alongside nationals as well, and they would do the research and locate how many people are here. We know that around this city there are about 60 villages of this particular people group. Who's going to coordinate a plan of action to evangelize all the people groups within this country? So a big part of what we do was people group research, just knowing what's there. So as we move on, another thing that we do is evangelism. Evangelism is something that I take very seriously. You see me there posing. It really should be somebody else in front of all that. You see paracord there of different colors. We would braid that paracord, and we deliberately chose those colors for 2 reasons. Number 1, you can tell the gospel message with the different cords, just like if you've seen the wordless book, gold stands for heaven, and red stands for the blood of Christ, and black stands for sin, and so on and so forth. But those are also the colors, if you notice, of the Togo flag. And so if we stopped in a particular Muslim village, which they're more prominent whenever you go north of Togo, particularly around Sokode, which is about halfway to a third of the way up the country, we could go into a village that's maybe not as open to receiving a very open gospel presentation. And so if people ask us, what does that cord mean? We would just say, well, this represents the Togolese flag. But if we have an opportunity, we say, well, this definitely represents the Togolese flag, but there's another message that I want to share with you. When we have an opportunity to speak with somebody in private. And so that way we're able to advance the gospel message. You see a person presenting the gospel, standing up and addressing a crowd. That's in a village. No electricity. We have to use a generator for that. Somebody supplied the gasoline so that we could power the generator. We would show a Jesus film that was in the local language, in their language, and that Samuel Avise, who was standing next to that representative, that is a person visiting us from Concord Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. And he was coming to help us evangelize a different people group than what you see there. In a much smaller photo, you see another group of people in their work reaching out to another people group, and it's folks from North Carolina. So the point is, we have all kinds of partners that we have formed with people from the United States. These are members of Baptist churches who have decided they want to work alongside us, and we will show them our whole ministry outlook, everything, all the projects we're doing, and they will agree, okay, we can do this, or we can do that, or this is what interests us, and we tell them everything that we need to do to accomplish that particular goal, and then they work alongside us, and one of the things that we say to them each time is, you have to partner with the Togo Baptist Church to get it done. So we want Togolese Baptists and partners with the United States working alongside us to get the job done. So as we advance, People group research, evangelism, those are all important. There you see discipleship is important as well. And there you see a picture of Kimberly, and she is reaching out and discipling a group of wives of student pastors. And this is not at the school where I teach, but it's a school that I visit on a regular basis. This is a school further north of Lome, about 4.5 to 5 hours north of Lome, in a little village called Moraton. And that building behind the ladies you see there is the classroom where normally I teach my lessons. I visit there twice a year, once each semester, and I will teach courses for pastors. It's generally adult level education at the junior high or the high school level. Many of those people, their reading is very, very low, and so we offer pastoral training for people whose reading level is not as high as the students that we train at the Hospital Seminary. But Kimberly is training the women, because many of these women have little to no theological training. They have had very little discipleship, and so Kimberly is offering a discipleship for these women sitting in this little gazebo, if you will, and she's training them because discipleship is something that is very important. Many of these women will not get discipleship any other way than through this school, this institution. So not only evangelizing the people, but discipling them, teaching them how it is to walk the way Jesus walked, that's very important to the overall mission and focus of what we do. The woman who is standing next to Kimberly and doing translation into the local tribal language is the wife of the pastor school director. Her name is Madame Chalare. So then, advancing one again, see number 4, another thing that we do is pastoral leadership training. And you see 2 photos there. One is me on the bottom. That's when I was a little bit younger and still had hair. Another one is the one of me up on top with some of my students. These are all students from the same school. That's the Hospital Seminary. Just to give you an idea, I teach full-time at that school, which means roughly I teach 4 courses every semester. My specialization is in practical theology. I love teaching practical theology and going through that with my students. My minors at Southern Seminary, I'm a graduate from there. My minors after pastoral theology were in systematic theology and Greek, so they have me teach courses in those subjects as well. I've taught students the systematic theological method. I also will teach students in Greek. I'll tell you one funny story, what happens to me so many times whenever I'm teaching a Greek course. I was asked to teach second-year Greek to a group of students. It could have been the third-year Greek class, I forget which. And there was a time when we wanted to look at a passage from the Greek New Testament together as a class. So I wrote the passage up on the board, and I made a point of leaving big spaces because I wanted to write the French translation. You realize this is in a French-speaking country, so all instruction has to be done in French. So I wrote the French translation underneath each line of Greek as we were going, hoping that would help my students follow the text. Well, I turned around to face my students, and everybody looked very, very confused by what I had just written. I thought, okay, is my French that bad? What's going on here? Well, the students said, sir, you better turn around and look at what you just wrote. Well, I did, and I realized I wrote French words, but I wrote them in Greek letters. So, so that's just part of what happens whenever you're teaching and you're interacting with multiple languages. You can have funny things like that happen, but I have a lot of fun teaching my students. I have a lot of fun teaching each of my classes. I do more than just stand up and just read a set of lecture notes. We get involved. I involve role-playing. I involve debates. I involve all kinds of instruction. When we teach systematic theology, I do not just stand up and just read a bunch of notes to my students. I will also give them information. Of course, they have to read, but I also teach them a 9-step process of just how to do the theological method. But it's not just an abstract question. I'll give them real ministry problems and say, now applying the theological method, how do you respond to this if we're addressing, let's say, the study of the Bible, or we're addressing the doctrine of God? And I say, take one of the topics from the doctrine of God and show me how you're going to think through this problem using the theological method. And so the students follow that, and so they're taking an abstract topic like systematic theology, but they are applying it to a concrete, real-life problem in ministry, and I'm telling them, this is how you think theologically when you're addressing a real pastoral issue. Theology is not just something that's in the seminary. Theology is real. It gets in under your fingernails. You get your hands dirty while you're doing it. That's the way systematic theology should be done. But I do more than just teach at Espetal. If we could just advance. We have other schools that need more theological teachers, theological educators. Unfortunately, they're not available. And most of these schools, they're not operating at the same level as Espetal. At Espetal, we're offering bachelor's degrees. We call them a licence. And also, we offer master's degrees. Just started that. Most of that's online, but we have just begun that program. I'm very proud of the school for doing that. But these schools are serving actually a larger number of students, but people don't want to go there because they're not as prestigious as the Espetal Seminary. But those people need theological education as well. So I already mentioned that I go to Moraton. That's a small village about 5 hours north of Lomé, Togo. And I will go there and I will visit with the students and I will teach classes. A lot of them are the same classes that I teach at Espetal. I just bring it down to the level of the students that I'm trying to teach because, again, many of them are operating at a junior high level of education. Some of them may be at a high school level. Their literacy level is very low. We can train them. We just have to bring it to their level. When I go to Moraton, just to give you an idea of what the conditions are like, no running water, no electricity. And I stay there for a week, and sometimes the temperatures reach 120 degrees. But this is what we do. Other times I visit other places. You'll see Benin up at the top. Benin is a country that borders Togo. And I will go to another small town called Yoakum, and there we have the Institut Biblique Baptiste de Benin. And so I will teach there. Again, it's about the same education levels, students operating about the junior high school level of education. I will teach a lot of the same courses that I teach at Espetal, only I bring it down to that level of education while I'm training them. Usually I can drive to Benin to do that because it's about a 5-hour drive to reach that place. But I'll take a plane usually and fly to Burkina Faso to teach at a third school, and that is the Institut Biblique Baptiste de Koudagou, which is the name of the village, Koudagou, in Burkina Faso, and I will teach students there. And there it's a particular challenge because at the same time that I am teaching in French, I can hear about 2 or 3 other students providing translations for other people in 3 different tribal languages. So it takes twice as long to teach a course because I have to wait for the translator to finish what it is that I'm saying. And so that offers some challenges, but we managed to get through. Burkina Faso is known for having temperatures that have reached as high as 140 degrees before. So it's much drier there than it is. Where we are in Togo, we're in a tropical rainforest, so we deal with 90% humidity most of the year, whereas in Burkina Faso it gets much, much drier. So it's a dry heat. It's not as intense as 120 degrees in Togo with 90% humidity. But in a given semester, it's normal for me to teach about 4 courses at the Espetal Seminary, but then to travel and teach a week-long modular course at the school in Moraton in Togo, at the school in Yoakum, Benin, and at the school in Burkina Faso, because theological education is so important. Did you know that 82% of pastors that identify as evangelical, we're talking worldwide, lack any theological education whatsoever? Okay. We just don't have enough theological educators out there to equip these pastors. And unfortunately, if there is a vacuum, somebody is going to rush in and try to fill it. And I think you know who that usually is. In one area where I went to train in Togo, a different location that I only visited one time, there was a radio station broadcasting messages from the Christian Science group. We have Jehovah's Witnesses running rampant. And anytime we plant churches as Baptists, the Jehovah's Witnesses come in right behind us. And our own convention office in Lomé, the Mormon church put a huge sign on the wall of the compound for our convention office with an arrow pointing this way to the Church of Mormon. And so the Mormons, anytime we go to one place, the Mormons are right there beside us, wanting to take whatever it is that we plant or whatever work that we're doing. So the opposition is there. And we have to work against that. And the only way to fight what it is that they are doing is through information, informing the people the difference between truth and error. So that's why theological education is such a big part of what I do, of what we all do. If we could just advance again, please. So another thing that we do that is so essential to our work and that enables me to work not only in Togo, but also in Benin and also in Burkina Faso is convention relations. That's not me teaching a course up there. That's me giving a presentation before leadership of the Baptist Convention of Togo. And what we did was, when we came for this last term, we arrived in the latter half of 2014, and we stayed right up until the end of the first half of 2018 this year. Well, what I did for that first 6 months was I sat down with the convention leadership and I said, we are going to put together for the Baptist Mission of Togo a strategic plan. Basically, it identifies what's our main goals. We said I wanted to have 5 main objectives and then 5 main domains. And under each of these 5 domains, what are specific objectives we're going to do over the next 3 years? And we do all that through the lens of what's our vision, our mission, our values as the mission. And I had them tell me the objectives that they wanted to do. For example, one of the things that we do is humanitarian aid or mercy ministries. They told me the different humanitarian projects that they would like for us to undergo. So I listened to them and we wrote that down and I tried to show them as we go. Look, you asked for this, 2 years later we're doing it. Took me a while, but I honored the agreement that we made when we developed that strategic plan. So in that photo that you see up there, that's me working with the convention leadership, and we're putting together our strategic plan as the Baptist Mission of Togo, and the convention had the ability to speak into what we do as a mission, and we work side by side. I don't try to see us as working against the convention. I like to see us as coming alongside and working with and through the Baptist Convention of Togo. So you see Kimberly there. She's with the Pastors' Wives group. That's a group of women who meet regularly, and they are the wives of pastors. It's very similar to WMU, and yet we do have that group as well, a WMU in Togo, but Kimberly has invested a lot of her time with the wives of pastors because she's the wife of a fellow pastor or ordained minister. As we advance again, another thing that we seek out for us to do, everything that we do is volunteer assistance. You know, I cannot accomplish everything that I want to accomplish if we don't have people going out. And so in that photo, you see me with a group of people from a visiting church. Again, that's a group of people from Concord Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're out in the middle of the bush. And the people from Concord brought soccer uniforms and a soccer ball, and the chief declared that the youth in his village are going to go play a soccer game. So we're sitting under a tarp watching the youth of that village play soccer in a field. And so someone took a picture of us while I'm texting my wife and letting her know that we're watching a soccer game, a soccer match. But you'll see a youth in that photo, the guy in the white t-shirt that's looking right at the camera. That's a student from the college at Southwestern Seminary. He is finishing the requirements for his bachelor's degree at the college at Southwestern, and so he stayed with us and worked for 6 months. So we're always trying to cycle through students. We're trying to cycle through volunteer teams, medical groups. We'll invite carpenters if people can come, electricians, people with skills, something that they can contribute, people who just want to just help in any way that they can. And through that, we show them, look, here's our plan. This is what we've developed with the Baptist Convention of Togo. Out of all the things that we have listed here, where's an area that you can plug in? You might find it interesting to know that Kimberly and I are members of Auburndale Baptist Church, which is not very far from you folks. We're part of the Long Run Baptist Association. We were sent out by the International Mission Board. We're very grateful to be part of the International Mission Board, but we were appointed by Auburndale. They had their own commissioning service for us. I report regularly to our pastor, Brian Croft, and I tell him what we are doing. I have to give a report to the church and tell them this is what we are doing as missionaries sent out by Auburndale, even as I abide by the sending agency, the International Mission Board, because Auburndale could not send us and finance us and support us by themselves. That's why we have the agency like the International Mission Board, although as a church, we are accountable to Auburndale. And we respect their authority over us as the local church, and what we are doing is an extension of the ministry of the local church, which is Auburndale Baptist Church. Well, you're part of the same association, Long Run Baptist Association. And that's a decision that you have to make as a congregation, but how beautiful would it be if Ormsby Heights Baptist Church partnered with Auburndale in a missionary who was sent out by them? That's just a thought, something to think about, and identified with a particular ministry and just said, we like this ministry, or we can identify with that ministry, let's come alongside with the work that they're doing. You would not be alone. There are other churches, but the work is not finished. And many of these unreached people groups do not have sponsoring churches or churches who have partnered. So that's just something for you to pray about, to think about, maybe discuss amongst yourselves as a congregation. Maybe this is where God is calling you to work alongside if you want to get serious about missions and being part of it. Because again, don't just think that this is ministry that we are doing as missionaries. Consider this as an extension of the ministry of the local church. Okay? I work with Pastor Brian. One of the classes that I taught was in crisis counseling. And we sent out students as student chaplains to a local hospital. And the textbook that we used was Brian Croft's book, Visit the Sick, that we had translated into French. And so in a way, Auburndale was continuing its ministry through me with the literature that had been published by Brian Croft, and we were using that at the seminary to teach West Africans, which was impacting not only students from Togo, but students from Burkina Faso, students from Benin, students from other French-speaking African countries. So the influence that Brian Croft had went beyond just the United States, and it was going to multiple countries throughout West Africa. I believe the same kind of thing can happen here, depending on what the level of involvement and the level of commitment that the people are willing to put into that ministry. So we move forward. I don't want to take too much time. Mercy Ministries is a big thing that we do, and I've taken a lot of time already, so I don't want to go a long time into that, but if we advance, I'm just going to show you some of the big projects that we did. You see us there. We were in Togo when the Ebola outbreak happened. I'm sure you remember Ebola when it was in the news. By the grace of God, we had no reported cases of Ebola in Togo, but we had a nationwide emphasis. What you see there in that photo is a national broadcast in Togo. Kimberly and I are seated with the president of the Baptist Convention of Togo, and we are part of a massive campaign. By the time we were finished with it, it's believed that more than 15,000 people received some awareness that we had done that not only gave them information about Ebola, but also presented the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so we were able to do that with an organization with the Southern Baptist Convention known as Baptist Global Response. They were able to give us a grant, and we were able to take part in an Ebola campaign that not only let people know about how to avoid contracting Ebola, but also presented the gospel simultaneously. So we advance. I'll tell you another humanitarian project. That's flood relief. There's an area of Lomé near a river, and flooding caused more than 1,000 people to be flooded out of their homes. We partnered with a local Baptist church in that area. The pastor was actually part of the senior leadership of the Baptist Convention of Togo. I worked alongside him, and he organized all the people of his church to canvass the neighborhood, find out what the needs were. We got a grant from Baptist Global Response, and we provided aid through that church to help all of the people who had been flooded out of their homes as a result of all of that flooding. But as the people received aid, they also heard a gospel presentation by our local evangelist, Samuel Avise. At the end, all those people received aid, and 2 churches were planted. So humanitarian aid is a very big part of what we do. We're very serious about it. Maybe you hear some of the stories going on in the news in certain Baptist churches. It seems like there's a conflict going on about do we do evangelism or do we do social work or some such thing. In the African understanding, there is no conflict. The two go together. And that's how I see it as well. I do humanitarian work as I'm presenting the gospel, and what God has put together, let no man put asunder. So as we move on to another event, there was hospice buckets. I mentioned something about that earlier. Baptist Global Response has these buckets with all kinds of things that you can distribute to sick people. I trained a group of pastors, a group of students, how to do crisis counseling. They visited a hospital. They distributed buckets, evangelized more than 800 people. As they would distribute the buckets, they would provide crisis counseling and present the gospel of Jesus Christ. And in doing all of that, we were able to lead many people to Christ. The students not only did work in evangelism, they also received practicum training in crisis counseling as pastors. So really, there was no division. Is this theory or is this practice? Well, or is it ministry? Is it evangelism? Or is it mercy ministry? I'd say, well, it's all of the above. We can implement all of that together. So we move right along. I'm going to try to wrap this up. Health clinics, you can ask Kimberly about that. She worked with a group of nurses from near the Dayton, Ohio area, and they were working in a part of the country where two pastors with the Togo Baptist Convention were trying to do more work and building up the church there where there was little to no church presence, and we did that through this health clinic that came by from these groups of nurses. So that was a very big impact. We were very proud of that work that went there. So we move right along. Another thing we do is we work with orphans. That's Pastor Denny Otto's church. Orphan care is a big part of what we do through a grant through Baptist Global Response. We are able to provide uniforms, pay the school fees for the students, and take care of a lot of their basic needs. And we do this through local pastors that we know. A big rule that I make is I will only work with pastors I have had a prior relationship with. Denny Otto is a former student of mine. There's another person who's a partner. He's a member of the faculty at the Pastoral Seminary, so of course I'm going to work with him. Another fellow is part of the leadership of the Togo Baptist Convention, and he was the one who organized the work with that flood relief ministry that I told you about. So of course I'm going to partner with him and his orphans. So we do that, and that's evangelizing a lot of the orphans, because over half the population in much of West Africa is under the age of 18. If we don't reach out to them now, when will we? We need to reach out to the orphans, and we need to give them skills, we need to give them training, we need to give them a stable environment so that they will be functioning adults who have also heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. So moving right along, another thing that we did was just poultry business. We were helping a person that had worked with me in our first term with a translation, and so he had married a wife from a Muslim background tribal group. They disowned her. The guy had really no means of support, so through a grant, again through Baptist Global Response, or actually a loan, we were able to help him get started with a poultry business. It was really neat watching all these chickens delivered all the way from Belgium. And amazingly, all but one of the chickens survived. So, and with that, he's trying to start a business because his chickens look a whole lot healthier than a lot of the chickens that I see running around Togo. So let's hope it stays that way. So as we advance again, finally, I just want to let you know how important it is for us to proclaim the true gospel, because these were our colleagues. They were our mentors when we first arrived, Randy and Kathy Arnett. Randy received his PhD from Southern Seminary in Missions, and that book is something that he wrote about Pentecostalization. Prosperity gospel. If you've heard of guys like Benny Hinn or Creflo Dollar, fellows like that, you know, you may think that's just something to laugh at whenever you turn past TNT on your cable channel. Over there, it's much more serious. It is infiltrated, it has infected just about every single church in Africa. It is scary, and the scary part about it, you know, we may just think, well, okay, they just act a little crazy whenever we see stuff on television. Over there, you take any Pentecostal practice that's done here in the United States, I can show you a parallel with African traditional religion, with all that stuff there. So the people are doing that. They're really just bringing all their African traditional religion background and all that baggage, and they're bringing it now into the church. So it's like paganism is existing within the church. And the only way to combat that is with good teaching, solid teaching. Randy wrote about that. Unfortunately, he perished in a car accident in the Democratic Republic of Congo back in March. And so now we are trying to continue that message. And so that's what we are about. This is what we do with our ministry in Togo. We could not do that if folks like you, churches like yourself, gave of your offerings to the Lottie Moon Christmas offering every year, because that pays a significant portion of our salaries. I believe the figure is 90% of what we receive comes through the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. So thank you for what you give. Don't hesitate to keep giving, because we couldn't do what we do without you. But all the same time, I hope this gives you an idea. We've been on the field as a family since 2009. We were appointed in 2008. As a family, we've been going for 10 years now with the mission. Prior to that, Kimberly and I served for 2 years as 2-year missionaries. That's called the Journeyman Program. So I've been with the IMB now for over 12 years. By God's grace, I hope that my health and everything else will hold up and we'll be able to serve for much longer. But we couldn't do that without people holding the ropes. That's you, giving to the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. So I've gone a little bit over time, but thank you for allowing me this privilege and this opportunity to speak with you. I can answer more questions after we've concluded the service, and we've got a little display here. Feel free to come forward. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Why don't we pray together? Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for the privilege of sharing, and I pray for Ormsby Heights Baptist Church, that they will embrace the mission, as they said, and get serious about coming alongside missions, working with missions, and going themselves, as well as praying for the work that is ongoing, and that they would also remember to give and to support the work that is going on. This could not happen without mechanisms like the Lottie Moon Christmas offering and the Annie Armstrong offering as well for work going on in the United States or North America. May this work continue, and we say this in Jesus' name. Amen.